Welcome to the Sales Podcast, session 63. Trial by fire, trial by logic, trial logic. Welcome to the 63rd edition of the Sales Podcast. I'm Wes Schaefer, the Sales Whisperer, your host. Today we've got the founder and CEO and owner of Trial Logic, a good friend of mine here in the Temecula Valley, Mr. Rick Robbins. Trial Logic helps doctors conduct research. It's a fascinating business. Rick has a great story of turning himself into an entrepreneur when he had no idea what it meant to be an entrepreneur. And so I think you'll enjoy his interview and his story and his passion about how he made that switch and how he now earns every 2 weeks what he used to make in a year as an employee. So it's a great story. You will want to listen to it. I like to start with a joke pertaining to the topic usually, but today is not really a joke. It's an interesting quote from Arthur Conan Doyle via his individual you may recognize known as Sherlock Holmes. But he says, it is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data. In other words, do not jump to conclusion. In the 7 deadly sins of selling, I call it assumption malfunction. In salespeople, we make all types of assumptions, like we assume we're speaking to the decision maker, or we assume somebody is not the decision maker, or we assume they have money, we assume they do not have money. We make a lot of assumptions because we're too afraid to ask the hard questions. So make sure you ask all of the hard right questions, and you do that by having your questions written out ahead of time, like a pilot has a checklist, right? Like an attorney will have on that legal sheet of paper questions they want to take the witness through to prove their case. You and I are the same way in a selling situation. Make sure you have questions prepared ahead of time to make sure you're getting all of the answers, even if the answer is no. All right, that's how you build a business. If you need help with that, check out thesalesagenda.com. I've got a free giveaway there on how to set a good agenda for a sales meeting. Now, on to the Sales Podcast Creed, which is, today is my day. I work diligently towards my goals, which are bigger than me. I bite off more than I can chew, because only then will I truly know my current limits, and surpassing them becomes my new goal for today. Through education, accountability partners, and bold, decisive action, today will be better than yesterday, and tomorrow will be better yet. I'm ready to produce. If you dig this podcast, please show a little love. Visit thesaleswhisperer.com/love, and a little tweet will pop up, and just hit tweet, and it's that simple. So now, without further ado, here's my interview with Mr. Rick Robbins. Rick Robbins, my Murrieta cohort in crime, owner and founder of Trial Logic. Welcome to the Sales Podcast. How are you?
Thanks a lot. Doing great. Thanks, Wes.
So I love the fact you're willing to just hop on with no script. What the heck are we doing? And that's
how we roll.
Keeping it real.
Yeah.
Would you mind taking a second? I mean, you're not a celebrity or anything, but you've built up a nice business. But people probably don't know who you are. Would you mind taking a minute or two, kind of tell people who you are, how you got started, and what's happening?
Sure. So I have been working in clinical research for the last. Well, let me just start up. My wife would be remiss. I would be remiss if I didn't mention my family. So I am first a husband.
I would have spliced it in. I got like this thing that sounds like your voice. Oh, I love my wife very much and my family.
Exactly.
I mean, I got your back.
I am Tammy's husband. How about that?
There you go.
And we have a couple great kids. We have a daughter who is now 20, Ariel, and 2 young boys, 5 and 7, Kai and Mateo, and just have a great time with all of them. And we moved up to Temecula Valley almost 10 years ago. Well, about 10 years ago now. And
me too.
Yeah, right on. So born and raised in San Diego, and we moved up from San Diego. And at the time, we owned a tax business. And I started Trialogic back in 2002, so we had Trialogic at that time as well. And at the time, Trialogic was more so me. It was me working as an independent contractor.
Isn't it always? It's always just me. It's like, I'm tired of just me. I need some help.
Exactly. So what I would do is assemble teams, and we would provide a number of support elements to pharma companies that were conducting clinical trials. So we would go out as a team to ensure that these research offices, these doctors' offices and medical practices were operating in compliance with the FDA regulations, and did that for a good number of years. And just 2 years ago now, implemented a brand new, totally different model, leveraging the same players, the pharma companies, the research sites, and myself and colleagues. But now my colleagues are now our employees, and we work as a team. We have an office here in Marietta and an office in Dallas. And I can give you some more details about exactly what we do and how we got here based on your questions you asked.
There you go. Well, the main thing is my daughter's coming in at, you going to get me lunch? All right. Bring me back any food you got. I'll eat leftovers. That's what she, my wife, but my wife just had a baby, right, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So we homeschooled the girls, and the oldest says, we're going out to eat. I said, well, bring me whatever. She says, you're getting leftovers.
Okay.
The glorious life of an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah, man, and a father with a newborn in the house. Exactly.
That's how we roll. All right, so let's back up there. I mean, how did you get started on your own? A lot of folks that are listening are either struggling to launch their business, maybe they're still employees, trying to figure out how do they make that transition with a family. Maybe they are a solid company but looking to grow. I know you lately have taken things to the next level, so we'll talk about that in a second. But how did you make that transition from employee to entrepreneur?
Really, man, I was so out of the loop on what it took to build a business. Had never been a business guy. I guess this was maybe 12 to 15 years ago. I just got married, so now it'll be 13 years. We've been married this year in June 3rd, and I do know that date, by the way. But really, I just looking to do something different. I'm looking to expand myself. I've always been interested in personal development. And so I was reading this book by Robert Kiyosaki, and he broke down a few different ways to create wealth. And one of them was business ownership. And he talked about multi-level marketing and all that. And I wasn't interested in that. I just have never been drawn to that type of business model. While I have some friends that are very successful in that area, in continuing to listen, he says, well, you can start a business or you can buy a business. And I was so out of the loop. I guess you can just say I was ignorant. I didn't even know what he meant. I didn't know you could buy a business.
Right.
Here I am, an adult. How do you buy a business? What is that all about? And he went in and broke it down a little bit. And so what we ended up doing was I bought into a franchise, a tax franchise. It was about $10,000 to get in. And they flew us out to Houston. We learned how to run the business. And here these guys were all Hicktown, but they knew what they were doing. They were
I'm from Houston. Don't be bagging on the H-Town, baby.
Yeah. So, but the thing about it is, my wife and I, here we come. We like to consider ourselves polished to some extent. Bottom line is, these guys didn't go about any frills, but they were about business. And they taught us business. While they were focusing on the tax business, what we were learning was business. And one of the other things Robert Kiyosaki said in that book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, was don't work for money, work for knowledge. And so here I am just absorbing it all, not knowing where it's going, but just considering the fact we're going to open up this tax business. So anyway, we opened this tax franchise. We did great. Everything worked out smoothly. Not everybody that started with us did so well, but we had a good experience with it. And what I recognized was, while the industry that I worked in as a professional in clinical research, pharmaceutical research specifically, very unrelated to the tax business, but all of the ethics that I learned through having this franchise, I saw how I could implement them myself and got up the nerves to go as an independent contractor. And although I didn't build it to have a lot of employees and such initially, I used a lot of those things that I learned from the franchise ideas, and we kept the franchise. And after having it for about 4 years, we sold it as we were moving up to Temecula Valley. But even with the tax franchise, after having it for a year, we said we could do this on our own. Why do we need a franchise? And I'm sure that's the idea that most people have, but that's why they franchise themselves and keep you from just copying what they do and learning on their dime or learning through their experiences to work against them as competitors.
Right.
So that's how I broke into leaving the employment realm.
How did you find a franchise? I mean, by reading the book, did it just kind of open your eyes, just kind of had the antenna up and you ran across it? I mean, that's such a big jump from pharmaceutical and medical to a tax franchise.
Sure. No, not at all. It didn't go into any detail on what to do in the book.
Right.
I just looked online. You can actually search, for inexpensive franchises to purchase, to buy into, and you'd be surprised. You can buy small $2,000 entry franchise to be able to sell, candy bars or something through vending machines. There are all types of different ways to go into it and different models, and it's really just about figuring out what makes more sense. What maybe some people want to find the lowest barrier to entry. You consider that. What's going to have the greatest rate of return? Consider that. A lot of different vantage points to approach it, but the key thing is just to get out there and figure out what makes sense to you.
Yeah, you brought up a couple of cool things there. I mean, number one is the fact that you had the money to invest. I mean, did you have it? Did you slap it on credit cards? What did you do there?
We did put it on. It was an Amex purchase. At the same time, we were able to get a strong return on that investment.
Right.
We didn't have. We were really banking on making money off of it. So while we probably had the money, we weren't spending the money, as it were.
Right. Well, and so that's another great story is, I mean, you work the angles. I've invested in deals and lost money, but, hey, I learned every time. I learned what not to do. And after enough times, I finally figured out what to do. But, I mean, what separates you from most is that you pulled the trigger. I like to say pulled the trigger and rode the bullet. Right. And I'm glad it worked out for you. But basically, the lesson here is you were open to ideas. People will say, oh, this is my niche or whatever. But I always tell people business is business. Right. I mean, is running a tax franchise all that different from running Trial Logic?
Not really. I mean, the bottom line is your payroll is your biggest expense.
Yep.
Your client is your greatest level of is your greatest interest and attention. Gets your greatest attention. Same fundamental laws bode well. If you can remain outwardly focused and consider how you can make a difference and make a contribution, you can be successful.
Right. So you sell that business. Had you already started Trial Logic when you moved up here?
Yep, had just started, and again, it was more so as an independent contractor.
So then, when did it become yours?
Well, that's a good question, because as an independent contractor, I was still working as an employee to the greatest extent. I would go under a contract with Pfizer, for instance, and I was working a 9-to-5 for them. It just wasn't as their employee. So it was more of a glorified employee relationship. And then at some point I decided, well, let me leverage some of my relationships and see if I can bring on a team that could make a difference. And so I did that a number of times, and before you knew it, I had a number of people that would work as monitors or auditors in the field and go out and work, and I would negotiate a rate, let's say for $80 an hour, and pay them $70 an hour. And so while it seemed like a perfect thing for me, when you take out the taxes and all the other things that...
You realize $10 an hour is not a big spread, huh?
Right. Well, I mean, having 10 people on your team, it's nice to be clipping $100 an hour and not having to show up. At the same time, you've got to administer all of the paperwork that comes along with it. And so there were a lot of learning elements and opportunities for me in that regard. But it was all still what I realized. Let me say this. At some point, I recognized, though, that I was only this glorified employee because I was afraid. I was afraid to really launch out and be a business owner. And there's a difference. There's a difference between being a contractor and being a business owner. I wasn't working on a business plan and seeing how I could make a significant impact with my ideas. I was really hiding. And this was my experience. I'm not suggesting that anybody who is a subcontractor and works as a contractor is doing anything wrong. But for me, as I worked on myself over the years, I recognized that I had a lot of fear that kept me in that space.
Mm-hmm. So how did you overcome that fear?
Okay. All right. So the way I got over it was
we had to go there.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. The honest to God truth is, as I was working as a contractor, I went to work with one agency, with one pharma company, Sanofi Aventis, and they said, in order to work for us as a contractor, you really have to go through an agency and work as a W-2 employee with them, and you can still work with us. And because things were so slow at the time, this was about 4 years ago, they said, you're going to have to go in as an employee with them. And so I said, okay, I'll do that. Well, with that, I had already worked a little bit of business for Trialogic on the side, developing research sites. And that was working out fine. But here I am, an employee. Well, at one point, they give me a notice that they want to fire me because they realize that I actually own a business on the side that they could see as a competing business. While it wasn't a direct competition to them, they didn't know enough detail about it and didn't want to be bothered. Bottom line is, Wes, they fired me. And that was actually the best thing that could have ever happened for me at that time, because I don't know that I would have ever given myself permission to leave the comfort zone and step out and trust myself. And here I'm now, just I guess since I got fired, it was 3 years ago, started the business model about 2.5 years ago. And what I was making then, at that time, I make probably every 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. And that's not just as a business, but what I bring in for myself.
Right.
So, and I would have never dreamt of bringing in 6 figures on a monthly basis. It didn't make any sense to me. But what I was purposed toward doing was going to make such a significant impact. People are seeing the value of paying me that amount.
Right. Well, I love it. I mean, I always tell a story. I mean, just had our 7th kid, but I was on unemployment when 2 of them were born. I've been through more ups and downs, working with a bunch of technology startups. It just, and I was always paving my own way, even working for somebody. And sometimes the company just didn't work out. Sometimes I just butted heads. We're like, I got to go. But it's God puts us in tough spots sometimes, or lets us go through a tough spot just to beat us down. Or, you have no time to be afraid when you don't have a job, right? You got to go make it.
Yeah.
So
exactly. I remember when I was getting my first client on the phone told me yes. And I felt like I was about to throw up because I didn't know how I was going to help him. He already had told me in January of the same year, I can't afford you or your service. Here we were in July. He was in a worse financial position as a physician but saw he had no other way to go. And I didn't know what I was going to do, man. But that forced me to just really dive in. And he's still a client today. And in his first year of us supporting him, he, made over $500,000 in just doing research. So we've been creating more and more evidence that we can be successful.
So this client, okay, that's a great story. So this guy, you didn't lower your prices, right? He said no in January, and then he said yes in July.
Correct.
And it was because he needed it. Right, he was hurting. So, I always tell people our job in sales is hurt and rescue. Right, we have to be comfortable making our prospects uncomfortable. Right, by bringing up questions. Like asking him. If you put yourself back in the January of that year, if you asked them, how are you going to pay your bills? How are you going to grow? How are you going to meet payroll? Yada yada. Those would be uncomfortable questions that he would have said, I don't know. But maybe if you'd have stood your ground, maybe made him a little more uncomfortable in January, maybe he'd have pulled the trigger earlier. But he had to, all of our prospects, they have to get to their maximum level of uncomfortableness before they pull the trigger, right? But he finally got there, and you stood your ground, and he paid you the money.
Yeah, he definitely did, and renewed again the next year because he's now getting the value and a greater return on his investment than any other one he's made.
Yep. I know I read a lot of Dan Kennedy, and he talks about he was like working from home, I think sitting at the kitchen table on a conference call, and a guy knocked on his front door, and he ignored him. Guy kept knocking, kept ringing. He ignored him. He walked around the back of the house, sees him in the kitchen, knocking on the door. And Dan Kennedy's like, what? What the hell? Finally, he opened the door, and the guy's like, your shrubs in the front of the house are on fire. So that guy went from an unwelcome pest to a welcome guest in about 5 seconds.
Yep.
And I always say that's how we have to see ourselves, banging on that door saying, your business is on fire.
Yep.
If you don't work with me, it's going to go up in flames, or at least some portion is going to get lost. But, now would you say you have that conviction and that passion for what you do?
Definitely. Well, there's no doubt in my mind that without what I provide, the people that I can support and help and make a difference for, they wouldn't be able to experience the great. Let me say it like this. Bottom line is, if someone wants to grow their medical business and they don't do clinical research, even though they don't know how to now, if they don't do research, I know that they can't do nearly as well without it. So I walk into that door knowing that I've got something of significant value, and they can't convince me otherwise. And if they don't get it, they don't get it, and I can move on. I can, dust off my shoes and move on. But it's not even a hard sell anymore. Now it's just a no-brainer. People know that they've got to do something different. And
but looking back, what could you have done differently to get that guy to pull the trigger in January rather than July? Because everybody listening, again, whether they're just starting out in business, need to make that first sale, or they need to get to the next level. We always, in my sales training, I'm always about shortening the sales cycle, right? Compressing things. But you had to go 6 months before that sale was closed. What could you have done differently?
Yeah. One thing I could have done differently is I could have asked him, if you're not going to come with me now, what are you going to do to solve your problem? Mm-hmm. What are you going to do right now? Because this is the right now opportunity. What are you going to do now? You've told me all your problems. You told me all your challenges. I'm not okay with walking out of here without at least hearing that you've got something figured out. Yep. Because I came to support you and to help you, and I'm not going to leave until I hear this answer.
Right.
And as he shuffles and squirms and all that, I would just be going in for the kill.
Mm-hmm. So do you think now, having this experience, 3 years, 4 years, now you have the confidence, right? You've seen the results. You've put money in your client's pocket. Yeah. But would you say, like in the beginning, because I always talk about this, salespeople always see themselves as beggars, like they're intruding. But now, I know you, and I know you see yourself as an equal, right? You're not a pest to some doctor or some business owner. You're an equal, and you're saying, look, peer to peer, you need this, right?
Yeah.
So, how can people accelerate that realization, right? So they see themselves as a trusted advisor, as a welcomed guest, even though they're quote unquote a salesman, in that role.
Yeah. So for me, I never saw myself as a salesperson. I'm a researcher. My degree's in counseling, background in psychology. So I've never been in sales, but every business owner is in sales. Mm-hmm. And what I learned, I can first say that I had to get past a lot of my own crap. And I did that through leveraging a lot of personal development. And that helped me identify how I had managed to create this little box for myself that I was comfortable staying in. Yep. And after I started learning how to get comfortable getting uncomfortable, I was able to try some new things. One of the things I stumbled upon is a definition, and I look at sales as something I would call enrollment. We're always enrolling. You're either being enrolled or you're enrolling someone. And the definition of enrollment is getting someone else to do what you want them to do for their reasons. Mm-hmm. If I live my life that way, I win, and so does everybody else. Going home, seeing my little boys at home, and I want them to do something different, getting someone else to do what you want them to do, I first find out their reason. Why would it be valuable for them? So in the same way with that client, if I would have been more aware of why he wanted to do this, I could have dug in and been a lot more effective in speaking his language. So when he's talking about what he wants, he really wants to get free from having all these bills and so forth. Speak about bills and so forth. However you put it out there, give it right back to him. Show him a mirror. Let him understand that I've got him. I'm on the same page. But, yeah, that definition of enrollment really helped me a lot because the caveat there is knowing what someone else wants.
Right. So have you studied selling and persuasion, or has this kind of evolved just naturally, you just being in business and growing a business?
No, it doesn't. It does not happen naturally. You got to study. Read a book. The one of the most effective books for me, very basic one, old book, The Greatest Salesman in the World. You probably read that.
Yep.
And one thing that Og Mandino did in the book is he left these 10 scrolls within the book. And the person in the book was to read these scrolls one scroll at a time for a whole month at a time. Right now, as we're moving into May will be my 10th scroll. So I've been 10 months on this book. Monumental leaps in my business.
Right.
Monumental leaps in my business.
Mm-hmm.
What we've done this quarter was what we did by the half year mark last year. Just
nice.
Making significant impact on the way that I show up. So yeah, I learn through reading. However, I'm not an avid reader. I don't read a whole lot of books. I just believe that my mentor is Darren Hardy, who's with Success Magazine, and he says, man, if you would read one book all year long and read it and get to know it, I mean, a good book,
yep.
you probably come out ahead of those who read tons of books every month.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got his from your recommendation, the journal. Right, the living your best year ever.
Baby, look, I got mine right here. It's like we're doing an advertisement for Darren Hardy.
Bam! I need to have an affiliate link.
Man, I'm telling you, that living your best year ever, this is my second year doing it. There's nothing better that I've done, any tool that I've used that's been more effective. So as far as books go and all that, having an effective approach to goal setting and tracking myself the whole time, holding myself to what I really want, that's been a very big asset for me.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say? I mean, you have kind of, you're not some self-help guru or something. You're just a friend of mine that's a successful business owner. I mean, do you have kind of any parting words of wisdom or things you would say, tell people to go do? Just knock it out right now, stop what you're doing, or make sure you get this done by the weekend?
There's a quote. Oh, man, what's his name? This guy.
Probably Wes Schaefer, right?
This guy, Wes Schaefer, he said something that really affected me. And it's pretty much, in a paraphrase, in a world of change, the learners inherit the earth. Mm-hmm. While the learned find themselves beautifully equipped for a world that no longer exists.
Yep.
So my thing is to just say, learn as much as you can. If you're right now working in a W-2 position, embrace that and soak up everything you can so that you'll understand what to do with it when it's time. So many times people are losing opportunities because they don't see today as one. Mm-hmm. If we're looking for what's next and what's going to come someday and not seizing what's in front of us, we're missing out on what it's really all about. So the learners inherit the earth. Be learners.
Right. Something I forgot to mention, because usually we end on that nugget, but, can you share a time, because the things you've talked about, other than getting fired, you've pretty much had an up and to the right, progression. Did you ever get knocked down? I mean, was there something, a dark time that you overcame, and how did you overcome it?
I'll tell you, man, that time I got fired, it really was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
I think my biggest challenge personally was when my wife and I had the toughest season in our relationship, and that just takes all the wind out of you.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's home, right? That's home. And it was, again, through some personal development work that we got some things done. We went to counselors and all that. None of it worked.
Mm-hmm.
Till we started finding some principles that we can implement that really worked. Principles, man. Principles, if they're universal principles, they just don't change.
Yep.
And if we can, as we align ourselves with these principles, we set ourselves up to win. So when I lost my job, it was an opportunity where my wife was willing to believe in me a little bit more too, because all that time she was kind of resistant to me just leaving and starting something different. And I didn't really know exactly what Trialogic was going to look like, because it looks a lot different than I would have ever dreamed if you would have told me it was going to be this 3 years ago. But what I would say is what I did my experience at that time was a lot of stress. I mean, I was on my knees a lot, man. I was just so concerned because here I have a family to take care of, and I felt that this beautiful home that we had and all this stuff that we had worked to create, here I'm seeing neighbors get put out and, leaving. I mean, our neighborhood is not the same anymore because most people there are renting and thinking that this is going to be another house lost. I'm going to just be a statistic. And at one point, I just had to stop rehearsing all that crap.
Yep.
And decide what my life was going to be because I said so.
Yep.
And I pretty much just depended on my friends and those who had the positive things to say to keep encouraging me, and leveraged all that was in front of me and just kept on scrapping at it, man.
Yep.
It might not have been the most profound response, but that was my experience.
Hey, amen. Tell it from the heart, right?
Yeah.
Well, where can people find you? Just your main website, trialogic.com?
Yeah, TRIAL, like a trial, OGIC.com. While it might not have seemed like it, I do provide some speeches from time to time, motivational speeches, and I do some speaking in our industry as well. But I appreciate your format being straight, shooting straight from the hip. Some of the things that we talked about today were things that I hadn't talked about with anyone in a long time. So I appreciate that. And, by all means, they can reach out to me at trialogic.com. You can contact us, or you can hit me at Rick L. Robbins, RickLRobins at gmail.com.
Rick L. Robbins at gmail.com. I've got it. So keynote speaking, or if you're a doctor, if you know a doctor, if they want to do some drug trials, right?
Yeah.
Add some revenue to their business. It's funny, on the outside looking in, people don't think of doctors as being like entrepreneurial, running a business, but they're running a business, especially as the economy changes, healthcare changes.
Yeah.
I mean, so if you have a doctor that you love and you want to see them in business for a while, send them to Rick.
Yeah.
Add some income to their bottom line.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, hey, I appreciate you taking the time. April 29th, here we are closing out the month. Let's go make some money, shall we? And close the month strong.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right, man. Thanks, Rick.
Bye-bye.
There's a lot of wisdom and passion in what Rick just now shared with us. He talked about how he was so out of the loop on what it took to be an entrepreneur. But he learned that you could actually go buy a business, and it's true. But then he also started a business. He says, don't work for money, work for knowledge. Even though he got fired, it ended up being the best thing for him. It pushed him past his fear. God will only give you what you can handle. I've said this before. I was drawing unemployment when 2 of my 7 kids were born, and things still worked out. I was laid off 3 times in 2 years, twice on my birthday. So I've since moved my birthday. But always fallen forward, failed forward. So if you're in a tough situation right now, realize it will not last, but realize you may have to work your way out of it. Okay, just like Rick did. Everything worked out fine for them. But as he said, work for knowledge, not just for money. Keep your expenses in control, especially your payroll. I've worked from home for all these years. I've had an office now for a year, and I'm not renewing it at the end of my 12 months. It was a nice experiment. We did some training out of there, but I can sub out conference room space very inexpensively when I need to do my training events. So that's what we're going to do. But I've always kept my expenses low. Everybody that works for me is on a contract basis. So that has helped me be flexible and react swiftly either to growth spurts or even downtimes. So take that to heart, okay? Clients are the focus. What else? He was really afraid to launch and to become that business owner. He had that contractor/employee mindset. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's your goal. But if you want truly more security, you're probably going to have to go out on your own. Okay, and the results are, we talk about monetary success because that's easy to quantify and measure. He makes as much every 2 weeks now as he used to make in a year as an employee. But I know Rick and his wife. They are successful. They are relaxed. They are having a, quote, successful life, if you will. All right, because of the freedom that he has from owning his own business and being in control of his own destiny. I love the fact he talked about owning the sales process, and mentioning Og Mandino, the greatest salesman in the world. I've talked about it recently with Gary Vaynerchuk's 3-part series coming out where he gets down to the nitty-gritty. He says at age 15, he was a hardcore, pure salesman. And that's at his core. That's what enabled him to build his brand, his wine TV and his social media. Because at his core, he's a salesman. Too many people are glossing over the fact that you need to be good in sales to be good in business. So you don't need to be good at Twitter to be good at business or good at Facebook. Those things may be mediums that help you get the message out. But at the end of the day, you're in sales. Okay? Everybody's in sales. Even if you're an engineer, you're in HR, your business, whatever. Every interaction is a persuasive moment. Somebody is persuading or convincing you to take some action, maybe as small as where do you go to lunch, okay? But it could be about contracts and payroll and your own pay and bonuses and the structure of the company and whether or not somebody does business with you. Who gets the corner office? Who gets the better desk? Who gets the new computer? Who gets Joe's computer when Joe gets laid off or fired? Everything's a persuasive selling moment. If you're dating someone, you're in sales. If you're married, you're in sales. Having a lot of kids, we're selling all the time on who's going to do the chores, who's going to get punished if they don't do the chores, who's going to get ice cream if they do the chores without being asked. So embrace selling. Okay. If you need a little help there, please check out my program, 30daysalesgrowth.com. You enter the word podcast in the promo code and save 30%. And as always, thank you for listening. Feel free to show a little love. Visit thesaleswhisper.com/love. And a little click to tweet will pop up to make it easy to share. And as always, I appreciate you listening. Feel free to leave a 5-star review on iTunes and on thesaleswhisper.com site. And like I always say, remember to sell different.